a year or two ago, did some survey work on this very topic. And the sheet that I placed in front of you this evening are some bullet points or notes related to the survey for smoking in public parks. I went ahead and called some other parks and recreation agencies as well as some recreation commissions to get an understanding of where they're at today, if they do have anything in place. For the most part, most of them said that's not an area that they have discussed or approached at this time other than for their aquatic centers. However, there were a few exceptions to that rule. Some of those exceptions include Overland Park. The only other facility that they own and operate that's outdoors that they ban smoking is inside the fenced area at their new soccer complex. Of course, the turf area is artificial turf, so they do prohibit it at the soccer complex. The city of Shawnee, their museum area, they prohibit it there. Outside of that, it's just their aquatic center. The Johnson County Park District, their outdoor theater area in the bowl, they do not allow smoking there. And at the staff level, they have posted signs at Mid-America Sports Complex stating that smoking is not permitted there. However, I don't know that that's enforced. They didn't give me the impression that that's really enforced there. The Blue Valley Recreation Commission, they do have a rule that prohibits smoking inside their sports complex. So from the gate all the way in, smoking is prohibited. And then the Baldwin Recreation Commission, they do not allow it within their sports complex. However, he did note that it is a school facility, and so it falls back on school rules in their facilities. So that's the main reason for that. The 3 and 2 sports complex, they indicated that they do have some signage posted that they do not permit it around dugouts or bleachers, but if folks do go down the foul lines, that they would allow it in those areas. So that's a little bit of history and some results from some survey information we collected and information we collected over the phone. I don't think our intention this evening is to develop an ordinance to ban smoking from all public parks and the facilities within them necessarily. Quite honestly, even visiting with the chief briefly, that would be very difficult to police and to control. However, I think we can look at the possibility of preventing smoking in certain areas within our sports complexes, if that was the desire, or try to create some areas where it would be allowed and try and prevent it from being in the areas where kids are at for the most part, specifically soccer fields, around dugouts, bleachers, concession stands, things of that nature. So if it was something that council was interested in looking at, our recommendation to start with would be to have a certain distance from some of those areas and then put up the appropriate signage where we can have our facility staff point those out to help control that. I'd be happy to answer any questions or entertain any discussion the council may have on this.
Jeff, could we not just say that smoking's only only allowed in like the parking lot?
I think we could do just about anything we wanted to do and develop it as a facility rule. The thing that we want to be careful with is how we will enforce it or police it. Very much at the sports complexes, if we stated that it's not allowed inside the sports complex areas, just the parking lots alone, we can control that. Visiting with our own staff, one concern that we do have with that, with the rule being stated that way, would be our adult leagues. We have a a greater number of adults participating in our softball leagues than we ever have, by far. And some of them do smoke during games, not on the field, but around the dugouts or just outside the dugouts. So I think that that is one concern that staff has with that. So that's why we were discussing more, talking about certain areas. For example, from the dugouts in towards the complex, maybe we prevent it in that area, but if someone wanted to walk down the foul lines and away from where the majority of the public is, and they could certainly have that option too.
About just the stands, like at the baseball fields, and a certain radius from the fence line.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that would,
Yeah, I mean, USC, I think you can't smoke inside the football stadium, you have to go out
Right.
the gate.
That's where I was going. Anywhere that was contained by fencing with clear exit and entry points, I thought might be a good point just to set those boundaries that, out at Celebration at the ball fields, there's clearly defined entries and out, and that's where the smoking stops. But
Yeah, no question, the only concern, like I mentioned, would be with our adult leagues.
yeah,
That would be the only
if they're not smoking on the fields here, then they're doing better in the leagues I play in Overland
well,
Park. Yeah.
I say they're not on the field, but they could be in the dugout area. West Side Park is another sports facility, so
Right.
it's configured a bit differently, but I think in that area, again, we would try and say from, our rolling gates or just outside the dugouts on out, we would try and push in that direction, in a friendly way, but,
What kind of hardware would we need to buy, like smoking urns, in order to kind of facilitate, that smoking area with the signage that you speak of? I mean, would we want to, put in some urns in order to kind of help them understand this is the right area, this is the wrong area?
Certainly could purchase some of that. I think immediately we'd want to do some signage, appropriate signage. Having some urns, I don't know that we want to encourage it necessarily either.
Well, I mean, also from a safety perspective, I mean, it's been hot and dry, and, Randy the smoker flicks a cigarette out,
Yeah.
and, now we've got a soccer field on fire.
do we have any, I guess they're called ashtrays, I mean, anywhere in any of the parks?
We do not.
Do you
So
notice
people,
issues with
people,
littering?
people
Yeah.
just throw their butts on the
They
ground.
do, yes.
So, I mean, there's a good reason to accumulate them in one area. Well, what's the rationale on the pool, why we don't allow it there? Why did we set that up?
Well, I just think the environment that it is, and considering
Kids?
both kids, a lot of kids, a lot of bare feet, that's certainly a concern as well. We don't, cigarette butts is not something you would want in your filtration system either. So there are a number of reasons for the aquatic center.
Plus, it's staffed so high, enforcement would be.
Sure.
I mean, it's easy to say, put it out when there's someone every 10 feet when you walk, compared to the ball fields where they're in the concession stand.
And we've had to politely ask folks to not smoke in the facility.
One other thing, I mean, we've got a lot of covered picnic areas, where you've got a group of tables together. I don't know that most people want to enjoy some burgers or dogs with somebody smoking downwind of them. That would be...
Yeah, and that would be tougher to enforce. That would almost involve participant enforcement, because we typically don't staff at
Right.
those types of things.
Well,
I agree with you.
I'm
I think
thinking
that
signage.
signage for sure.
Yeah, do we think signage would be enough of a deterrent? I mean, enforcement's always gonna be an issue. This isn't something you send anyone out for enforcement. But signage in its own right, but then is that gonna cause issue with, I'm smoking, there's a sign up, and Chris comes and asks me not to smoke? Is there a conflict involved in that? And then where does it go from
I
there?
think, from what I understand with some of the other facilities, it can be complaint-driven. You want to have enough signage up so that it is visible. With the facility supervisors there during our activities, they wear staff shirts that they can be identified, so people do approach them, and they can politely ask the person to go to the approved areas. But it's really more complaint-driven unless they just see it taking place. the picnic shelters, again, you're right, Mayor, it would be difficult to enforce just
But it's
because
a
we
good
don't
idea
staff
just
those
simply
areas.
because of the
Yeah.
multi-use,
And I think there's more and more discussion, especially outside of the state of Kansas, on making public parks smoke-free parks. Again, enforcement is a major challenge, but that's somewhat the direction that some communities are going.
I think if you've got signage up, you have to depend on people to be good
good
citizens.
citizens,
Sure.
exactly.
Yeah, peer intervention. Chris, stop smoking.
I mean, I don't mind telling people to do
Yeah.
stuff like that, and I don't mind,
I think
being
smokers are
told.
used to being,
Yeah.
having designated areas, so I mean, if we're gonna
Right.
do something like that, then we do
It
it.
happens at work.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm not sure that there's much that we need to do beyond signage,
right.
and depend on the citizenship of the fine people of Gardner.
I like to think that would, when they become aware of it, that would take care of a majority of it. The soccer fields, there's not a fenced area, so I think our ideal on that would be to apply some no smoking stickers to our field signs. We have the portable field signs.
Right.
That's probably the most appropriate place to post that, and just train our supervisors to ask folks to go towards the parking lot area if they need to smoke, so.
Right.
What's the estimated cost for your signage then?
I think it would be minimal. We don't have a count on exactly how many signs we would put in place, but I would say,
No need to say, I just asking.
I would
You don't
ask-
have that number.
I would estimate it would be probably somewhere between $500 and $700, depending on how many signs,
Signs we get.
maybe less.
Personally, just from the number of youth activities out there, like at Celebration Park, my thought would be to start it outside the gates. And then if it does become an impact and we do get complaints from some of the adult, I mean, we can react later, I think, but I'd rather have it all the way out because I don't know what the percentage, the split is, but I would think it's more youth-driven events out there than it is adult-driven. It might, I guess it might be closer, I don't know, I might be underestimating that, but
Actually, the way we program it currently, for the most part, when the adult activities are at Celebration Park, they're all adult activities. They're on all the fields. And same goes with the youth. So today, we're fairly confident that,
Separation.
there is a good separation between the two. That may not always be the case. And it's not always the case today, but a majority of the time that is the case.
So how does the parking lot play into that for those post-adult game activities, kind of to Christie's point? Would that be a non-smoking space?
The parking lots?
Mm-hmm.
I would not necessarily recommend that at this time.
Yeah, I think, we've had one obviously vocal complaint, and a number of folks that have signed on to that, and I think, by some reasonable prohibition, Larry's suggestion, I think is a good approach. And then, I'm not bothered if we want a parking lot or in or not, it's not to me, I hope that folks are respectful both ways.
I might suggest that we start from the standpoint of the stickers on the football fields and the soccer fields. That's probably the best place we can post that. And then designate the areas on the baseball fields to be from our gates out. So basically past the dugouts out, and see how it goes. Because right now we allow it everywhere.
Right.
So if we do it that way, then they at least know they have someplace to go. They can still watch their child play, see how that goes, and may greatly improve. I think the idea, and I've witnessed it myself, is the parents that are right behind the dugout that are smoking, or right in the bleachers that are smoking. I think that's what we're looking to try to address for folks that have concerns.
So how soon does this roll out? I mean, do we have some sort of PR, message that goes out prior to somebody that's a smoker that says, oh my gosh, now we've got stickers all over the place?
Sure. I think we would address it certainly on our on our website, our facility pages as well. We could point it out in our city newsletter or the activity guide that we send out.
Perfect.
Won't necessarily try and draw much of attention to it. More of it will be our staff that politely points folks in the right direction.
We could put it in our league literature as well, when it goes out to the coaches and that they have
Absolutely.
to give to parents and so on, just to kind of keep it.
And I should add that in our training with our coaches and our coaches' manuals, that we do ask that they refrain from all tobacco use in practices and games. So,
Perfect.
if that's a consensus, we'll move in that direction and certainly let you know how things go.
Great.
Thank you.
So we have to have an ordinance change?
I don't believe so.
I
These
guess
are
the
simply
policy
the
would be-
facility rules.
Yeah. Policy change.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. Okay, second item is a presentation on the 5-county regional transportation study. David?
This presentation just stems from a meeting that was held on August 29. It was a public officials briefing by KDOT in the Johnson County area. This project's had extensive public involvement. They basically have tried to not go to individual cities, but have group meetings to collect as much comment as they can. Make sure I hit the right button. I'll try and touch on tonight is the background and importance of the KDOT's 5-county study, touch on the recommendations for the study and the importance of the study to the city of Gardner. And finally, we'll touch on a recommended response to KDOT from Gardner regarding the study. The background, it encompasses the 5 northeastern Kansas counties: Douglas, Johnson, Leavenworth, Miami, and Wyandotte. All stems from meetings that were held probably back in '08 or '09 between KDOT and some of the county officials, where they were concerned and realizing that the high-impact development was going to, what it was going to do to the transportation system. Recognizing the fact there was dimes on the dollar as far as money available for transportation needs. Also, one of the goals of the study was to combine all the multiple plans and transportation corridor studies that were undergoing or going on at the time. The study was 2-phase, began in 2009. The total cost by the time this is concluded in October with the report, the final report, is about $2.5 million. It's been 2 phases. The first phase was completed in late 2010. It was essentially a needs assessment to try and gather up all the, categorize all the development that was going on and try to collate what plans existed. The final report, as I mentioned, will be done in October for Phase 2. Its goal is to take the needs determined in Phase 1, develop a priorities for those needs, strategies to take care of them, and recommendations on how to best spend the money in the metro area. The desired outcomes of the study is basically to come up with recommendations that are technically feasible, politically acceptable, financially realistic, regionally based, and sustainable. They're also looking into multimodal. If you can find a way to solve a transportation problem by not expanding the capacity, such as park and ride or other strategies, then go to that first. Following that, the strategies are management of the transportation system. Some of the examples of that, if you'll give me a second to, basically transportation, signal timing, optimization, removing bottlenecks on freeways and arterials. On our scale, that would be like dealing with intersections before we start trying to expand roadways. Ramp metering, you do see that in the Kansas City area on 435 as you get toward Missouri. California, it's used quite commonly. Parking management, congestion pricing is to high occupancy lanes where you can have a toll and then a metering system. Then information systems, as you see, basically advising people of bottlenecks. One item, too, is you can look into variable speed limits. The idea there is to, if you do have a congestion, start slowing the traffic down before it gets there, so maybe you can buy more time for that congestion to mitigate. Demand management, public transportation, carpooling, changes in work hour beginning, and then capacity. Then we go back to, once again, transit, high occupancy lanes. The preliminary recommendations, as I mentioned, were reviewed at the meeting on the 29th at the Johnson County Administration Building. It included 16 corridors in the 5-county area. This map just shows a composite of all 16 corridors. Our intention is to focus on those that directly impact Gardner, which is I-35, 175th Street, and 199th Street, which is a combined corridor, US 56, and they also looked at the potential outer loop corridor, which would go from I-70 over to 71 along the east side of Johnson County and then the south side of Johnson County. The 435 corridor, excuse me, the I-435 corridor has several recommendations. Hopefully you can read them in the, I gave you a larger copy. The strategies that are recommended, let me back up a little bit. First, through the public involvement process, criteria were established to evaluate projects. Consists of like engineering, is like mobility and safety. Economic impact refers to regional prosperity and financial resources, basically what can it do for the area and how much will it cost and can we afford it. And then finally there was quality of life issues such as the environment, public health, social equity, livability, and choice. And choice refers to do you have alternate ways to go. The weighting was established through the public involvement process, and the costs are just very, very high level. As in their note, the KDOT and the study team attempted to include about 10 years of maintenance in the cost, and a cost-benefit ratio was developed. Needless to say, the higher the number, the higher the recommendation. However, based on either projects already programmed, some of the recommendations don't necessarily track with the cost-benefit ratio. Their top strategy is just to continue maintenance. Ramp metering is a fairly high benefit to help congestion on I-35. Recommending variable speed limits when you go north of 127th Street. Park and ride facilities are recommended. Lane control, and this is a lot of this hard shoulder running. This is kind of what they're doing with the bus system now on I-35. The Gateway project is currently funded. It's at 435, 35, and 10. The first phase is underway. The second phase will be underway in several years. Closer to home, widen 435 to 6 lanes from Homestead to Lone Elm. And then they're also recommending pedestrians, and then a truck inspection station, which we can talk about in a little bit. US 56 corridor was the subject of the corridor study that was just completed. City signed on and approved the agreement for the corridor management plan in 2010. The recommendations are to, once again, continue maintenance and operation, access management. The corridor plan had very specific access management recommendations. What was the mantra while that study was going on is what is can remain. However, when things redevelop, try to correct up based on the study recommendations. A good example would be on Main Street, where there are some specific recommendations on driveways to try and merge as properties redevelop. Finally, they're recommending at some point in the future a new interchange at US 56 and 199th Street. The studies were indicating that based on traffic patterns, which I could show you as we get farther along. This to say that we do have the corridor management plan. When we do have development along US 56, we work with KDOT for review and try to merge driveways and move them. A good example of what we have at the Quick Trip site was based on the corridor management plan.
So, Dave, on the purple sections
Yes.
that says suggested strategy, what does that mean as opposed to the ones that aren't shaded?
Those are the ones that, as part of this study, they were recommending pursuing. The others, they felt they had a higher chance of success, higher cost-benefit ratio, basically projects that could be done.
Even though the benefit ratio on these others is
Right.
quite a bit higher.
They also, based on public involvement, it's not a precise system. It was trying to weigh the political environment, the financial environment, and the need.
So does that mean these other things have already been crossed off the list?
No, they're just out there. I think what it means is that the ones that are shaded are the ones to concentrate on first, and then to move on as time and money allow. I should note, too, that these are a very high-level study, just to provide guidance. 175th Street and 199th Street corridors. These two roadways are part of the county's comprehensive arterial road network plan, which was adopted in 1999. They're designated as a Type 3 roadway, which is the highest level. This Carniff evolved out of, we can get into this with the circumferential route that showed, or the outer corridor. The county had been working on a circumferential route for years, from about 85 to 95, when it was finally basically stopped, recognizing they needed to come up with a way to get through the county. Carniff developed. I have a map later on I can show you on Carniff. The two recommendations for both roads, the first one is maintain operated. They're also recommending upgrading 199th to 4 lanes. One of the issues is a future connection to 71 Highway. As you all will recall, the South Metro connector was looked at this. That was several years ago that basically study stopped. And Carniff also recommends a connection across, never been come to fruition. For Gardner short term, as we can discuss in a minute, 175th Street is extremely vital. The area southeast of I-35 and 175th Street is a very viable development area. Great benefit, potential benefit to the city. Currently, the Lowe's project is basically a preliminary development plan is on the north side of the road, and considerable potential to the south side. They're looking on this part of this study ultimately, both would go to a 4-lane. As I say, the KDOT 5 county studies recommending the emphasis to 199th Street. As far as the city's issues are concerned, 175th Street is of vital importance. And then finally, the outer loop corridor I mentioned. This initially started, county started looking at this in 85 or 86. The original route under consideration took off at about 119th and K7, swung down along Hedge Lane, dodged along 175th Street north of the park, and ultimately was to tie in with Belton. Through progressive study over the next decade, it kept moving farther and farther out. Finally, by the time it was the county stopped, it was pretty much about where this line is shown. This probably does not have KDOT is not recommending further consideration or imminent consideration because of the low cost-benefit ratio. I will say in our public meeting, one of the county commissioners pointed out, he said, well, I don't agree with your prioritization. I see that, a great deal of potential for that connection, at least from I-35 up to I-70. So as far as the numbers go, KDOT's not recommending it. I think the county may be looking at it a little more seriously. And this is some of the cost-benefit analysis. As staff, we're recommending that we would respond to KDOT as follows. As far as the I-35 corridor, we'd recommend contacting KDOT and we support all recommendations to maintain and increase capacity of the I-35 corridor. It's vital to the city of Gardner and the southwestern part of the county. In 2011, KDOT had mentioned that they were, basically came out that they were recommending a way station. Their recommended site was at 183rd Street. As we can talk about in a minute, we're recommending that we renew or reiterate our opposition to that location because of the development capability, potential for that area. We also recommend that we support interchange improvements at both 175th Street and Gardner Road. Probably not part of the 5-county study because this is a very high-level study. However, something we need to make mention to KDOT so we can keep it on their radar. Finally, we would recommend support for an interchange at 183rd Street because of, once again, the development on the east side.
What are you talking about on 175th and Gardner Road? The interchange? What do you mean interchange? You mean?
Well, the interchange in both the transportation master plan that we council basically accepted of 09, December of 09, and then reiterated with the study I'll talk about in 2011. Basically, that interchange does not have the capacity to support the potential traffic at that location. Short-term improvements include signaling at the ramps, termini, but additional capacity improvements would be needed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking the intersection of 175th and Gardner Road. You're talking about the...
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the 175th interchange and the Gardner
I'm
Road,
sorry.
okay, yeah.
Must have been sleeping a few meetings ago or something.
No, yeah, interchange, I'm sorry. Interchange improvements at 175th Street and I-35, and Gardner Road and I-35.
Yeah, the
So I
downtown business owners agree.
Yeah, that was an interchange there.
I'm sorry.
I thought the widening of the streets made them mad, but it's an interchange.
No. It's, I think I just was looking at this PowerPoint too long and missed the vital, one of the dangers of having breathed it for too long, so I know what I'm trying to say, it just doesn't come out. And then also a future interchange at 183rd Street. For the 175th Street and 199th Street corridor, we would recommend supporting the recommendations to increase the capacity of 199th Street, and in addition to support capacity improvements for 175th Street. And also finally access management to preserve capacity. One thing about 175th and 199th Street, the farther you diverge from I-35, the more it will fall on the shoulders of the local agencies. But at least this would be something that KDOT, should they have funding, would be supporting. With regard to US 56 corridor and the potential outer loop, just continued support for the recommendations of the US 56 corridor plan, which we're a signatory to the plan. Finally, with the outer loop, staff doesn't have any recommendations. So the importance of I-35 and the 175th and 199th Street corridors, there's, once again, it all goes back to the interchange of 175th and I-35. As a key development area, on our current future land use map, it's showing, shows development, but our transportation master plan, apologize, too many papers, usually my downfall. For a case of okay. The transportation master plan was based on this future land use map, which hasn't been updated since '08. And it was mainly that update, I think, involved just some additions, just acknowledgement of the intermodal area. The traffic volumes that were based on the land use we had for the area southeast of the interchange, 27,000 vehicles on 175th Street in 2030. That'd be equivalent to what you're seeing on US 56 between Moonlight and Clare today. The assumptions included about 1,100 homes in that area, 200 multifamily dwelling units, and about 375,000 square feet of retail. Knowing that one of the side effects of those land use plans, it also did not create enough justification, or couldn't show that the need for anything at interchange at 183rd Street. So the city didn't have data based on our land use plan that hadn't been updated to say that you can't put the waste station at this location. Because we knew things were changing, because we knew this area had potential, we wanted to take another look at it from a transportation perspective to see what is the potential development of that with a new land use plan, and what would the impacts be to the adjacent roadways. Looked at two areas, the Gardner Study area, which is basically more or less the unofficial annexation boundary, which is between Clare and Hedge, and then adjusted land use based on a latest land use plan that had just been updated. As part of that, we were working with HDR and our planners, and developed what we felt was a realistic redevelopment for that area, trying to balance retail with mixed use, the potential for some warehouses possibly. The difference between the land use in that area that had been originally looked at versus what is this study indicated, which we now adopted as a update to our transportation master plan. Single family went from 1,100 homes to 4,800 homes. Multifamily went from 200 to 1,700. The big change was retail from 375,000 square feet to up to 4 million square feet in that area. And then finally industrial went from none to 800,000. And then office could go up as high as 7 million square feet in the ultimate build out. End result for those runs, this is I'm sorry to say, much too small for a person to see, but you'll notice the red on 175th Street. Basically, that's 55,000 vehicles a day versus the 32,000 or so that we had previously. 50,000, that's about what you see on I-35 running north of 175th Street, so 20 ultimate build-out. The other item is you could, with this redevelopment at 183rd Street, you can see roughly 27,000 vehicles a day using that. On the original transportation master plan, using the older land use, we're looking at 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles a day in that area. So based on a reasonable build-out for this, traffic would increase greatly.
Dave, going back to the slide before that, you said the number of residential and apartment increases were what again? What were those numbers?
And these, once again, these are just...
And who derived, or where do these numbers?
What we did was, this was adopted as a master plan. It needs to go back through as a basis of update to our comp plan. The thrust of this was to come out what could be the redevelopment so we could get a better handle on impacts to transportation. Went through, colored the squares, tried to come up with what seemed sustainable. You're looking at basically 1,100 single families to 4,800 single family units in that large area.
So it was 1,100, now it's 4,800.
Right.
Okay. And then apartments?
Apartments 200 to 1,700. These are all subject to change, but just for a planning basis to try and put transportation numbers together.
And that included, is that just the Gardner area? Did that include the Olathe plan as well?
The traffic includes the Olathe plan.
Okay.
However, we were trying to come up with a more realistic from what we felt land use for this, potential land use for this area.
And you said industrial went from 0 to,
About 900,000.
and where would I see that on here? Is it under business park?
Well, it's kind of thrown into the mixed use.
Okay, okay.
So
And
what
then
was the
also-
retail then, David?
Pardon me?
What was the retail then? Was it a
Retail's
million?
red.
Yes, sir.
Roughly, retail's 4 million.
4 million.
Uh-huh. And then finally, warehouse, excuse me, I didn't mention that earlier. It's thrown in with the mixed use, about 1.5 million. So with a, what's an alternate potential for this area, it definitely has some major transportation needs. In fact, on 175th Street at the interchange, you're looking at 6 to 8 lanes. So you're looking at development as intense as what you'd see at 119th and I-35.
Dave, when you say warehouse, about 1 million square foot, I guess, right? Now, are we talking big box warehouse, or are we talking a number of?
Well, we're talking
smaller?
just a total in some combination. So we.
So not really that there's a million square foot warehouse?
No,
that
there's
we
no,
have
this
to-
is all just, there's no specific project that matches any of these. This is just what's a number to plug into a traffic model to come up with traffic volumes.
Today, assuming that there's some development that begins to occur, that can be readjusted
Right,
based on what
right.
is changing as a result
Right.
of development.
One of the things we needed to have a better handle on what's needed, so if, when this area does start developing, we can say, look, we do need this, and here's a basis for it. Additionally, this was the basis for which this particular report was sent to KDOT back in April of 11, basically supporting the ultimate desire for an interchange at 183rd Street, and also supporting our opposition to the way station. Finally, I'd mention the CARNP plan, Comprehensive Arterial Road Network Plan, so you can see how it dovetails to some of this. This, as I mentioned earlier, was evolved out of the, basically the curtailment of the so-called 21st Century Parkway, which mirrored what was shown as the outer loop, knowing that possibly a limited access freeway may not be the solution. there will be development, there will be traffic increases. How can the county get that traffic around using the existing roadway network? 175th Street's classified as a Type 3, which is their higher type road. Originally, it was designated as a 4-lane road, and then they finally went to a 2-lane, but they are ultimately, recommendation is to preserve adequate right-of-way for 4 lanes or more. Both 199th and 175th Street fall under that. I believe, based on the 5-county study, the county's going to be looking at updating part of it.
I think that included Metcalf and 6 or 7 other east-west.
Absolutely, right. I say I've tried to concentrate on our area. Also mentioned the US 56 corridor study. One of the recommendations that came out is trying to deal with our western approach with Waverly, Santa Fe, US 56, the Y intersection at basically not Santa Fe, but 175th Street and US 56. Looked at several alternatives. One was to try and realign Waverly to cross at a 90-degree, closer to a 90-degree intersection, maintain 170 existing US 56 as the roadway. The other one was to reroute US 56 through a roundabout up to 175th Street, improve it. Conceptual only, the council looked at both. This was back in 2010, and agreed that this would be the preferred alternative, and it's part of the plan. It's what, when people are looking in that area, we say this is the future, no funding, no timing. But in future redevelopment, this would be the goal. One of the bases for that stems out of the traffic work being done with the US 56 corridor, which also mirrors what we came up with our transportation master plan. The predominant motion east-west is going to be on 175th Street. Waverly is going to be heavy, but more minor. US 56 becomes a very minor artery between Gardner and Edgerton. You're just not looking at, in the future, you're not looking at much more traffic on US 56 between Waverly and Edgerton as you see today. So that's one reason all this, the recommendations are developed. Mentioned earlier, there is interchange improvements proposed at Sunflower on 199th Street. Some concepts were developed as part of the US 56 plan. It all stems from the fact that the predominant traffic will be west of Sunflower and turning on to 199th Street. So there's some concepts to be looked at in the future. Also, there is distant concepts of possibly rerouting US 56 to 199th Street to I-35 and then just going dual on a dual route on I-35. Long range, US 56 will become a local road. Some other plans that are in progress. There's the it's now called the Southwest Johnson County Transportation and Planning Study. In fact, they had a meeting today of the corridor or the advisory committee and the core group. This is in progress. Hope to have some recommendations out of this study in about a year. Finally, just to dovetail on to all these discussions is our utility service areas. You do look at the area we've been talking about, southeast of I-35 and 175th Street, not in our water or our sewer service area. As far as sewer goes, the city could serve it, however, we would not be able to take it to our existing plant. We would either have to pick it up in a lift station, possibly pump it to Olathe, of which we have some capacity by contract. At some point, we probably would need to come up with other solutions, or possibly pump it to New Johnson County Wastewater's plant at New Century. So there's several ways to go, but as far as wastewater, we just are not in a position, we can't get it to our plant, or our plant's not set up to take it. Water-wise, it's in John Water District 1. Electric does have a line across I-35 and runs down to Clare. In fact, they've built to Clare at 175th Street. So they're in position, ready. With that, Back to our recommendations, once again, so our recommended response to KDOT for I-35 is basically to support the recommendations to maintain capacity and increase capacity. Reiterate our opposition to the way station on 183rd Street because of its potential to impact access to that area. Support interchanges on I-35 at 175th and Gardner Road, interchange improvements, and finally to support an interchange at 183rd Street. Probably the last two are probably much more, shall we say, minor improvements for the scope of the corridor study. However, we need to keep them in KDOT's view. With regard to 175th and 199th Street, we'd recommend advising KDOT we support the recommendations to increase capacity at 199th Street. We would support capacity improvements for 175th Street, which they didn't address or not recommending, and also to reiterate our support for access management to preserve capacity. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
On the 183rd, as I recall the discussion, if we'd had the ability to pay for it, much like Olathe did with Lone Elm, KDOT would not have opposed it. They would have allowed us that break in access. Is that correct?
We would have had to. It's kind of the way KDOT said, basically the first one with the cash wins.
Right.
So if we were to pursue going through the break and access study and to get it approved prior to them coming in with the way station, then we would be first in line with the money.
Okay. And then at one time we had talked about a realignment between Gardner Road and Moonlight, just a single interchange. Was that just a concept or that wasn't, I mean, that was just a thought
That was,
from
it was
rather than actual concept?
Right. It came out of some of the traffic discussions with intermodal. Instead of going to 175th Street, move it north. Whether that's feasible, it's probably closing out. It's long range.
Okay. And then,
But it was, as you say, it was just thought without much further deliberation.
and then I guess on the opposed, the way station, could we change that to vigorously opposed?
Sure. And actually, KDOT did mention that they were aware that we were opposed to it at our meeting.
I've had several meetings. It's been a while, but when it
Yeah.
first came up as concept, I had several meetings.
They seem to always remember it whenever there's Gardner officials in the rooms.
So, yes, Heath, I'm sorry.
No.
It was Chris, okay.
Yeah, actually, I understand that you were at a meeting about the freight district.
Yes.
Was there discussion
I don't
about-
believe it's called freight district, that's what I learned today.
Yeah.
Transportation use. Go on, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Softer.
Yeah, more palatable.
But, is there, I mean, one of the things that is highlighted here is a new interchange at, US, 56 and 199th Street. Wouldn't that involve realigning US 56 to, and I'm unsure about, when it says new interchange, that's a new interchange at US 56, a two-lane road that's running past 199th Street there?
Right, there's some conceptual alignments in the corridor plan on basically rerouting, basically separated access. I don't know if since I killed that, I don't know.
You're correct.
But then there is talk in that study group about realigning 56 along 199th Street,
And that-
535. Was that discussed?
Absolutely, and Tim, you were there, I was sitting next to you, that seemed, holistically, it seemed like it was the most talked about location was realigning it with 199th Street, in that meeting today. It was touched on briefly, but nonetheless, it was touched on.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about actually moving 56. I mean, that's going to be part of the study, that just looking at, okay, what's the options there, but they're also looking at, even if 56 stays where it is, improving that existing intersection. You know, where if you're going eastbound on 56 and you curve to the north towards Garden, just as you come out of Edgerton, you've got
Mhm.
railroad tracks right there. You also have flooding in that area, so.
Right.
So part of all that too, you know, one way or another, they're gonna be looking at something happening right there to improve that intersection.
Okay.
And which is that Homestead Lane, they're kind of running north and south, they're wanting, correct me if I'm wrong, they're wanting to utilize that corridor more, in the early run because of the floodplain and the cost associated with, I think it was a bridge and the 80,000-pound units that are gonna be
Yeah,
going.
that gets into the heavy hauling.
Yeah, heavy hauling, which I think is something we need to, as a council in the city, be more interested in.
I'm gonna talk about that.
Fair enough.
Just- All you have to do is ask. and-
Segue.
Okay. So.
Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm wondering what direction the conversation's taking. It was taking, let's relocate it,
Mhm.
or was that just conception?
I think it was a little of both. What do you think?
I'm sorry, my mind was somewhere else, but it's, as far as, I think it's very conceptual at this point,
Okay.
as far as relocating 56.
Okay, well, it just ended up a little ways down the list here, with the access management and following the 56 corridor plan being highlighted as number one, but I don't, I'm trying to remember, because I was just sitting in the audience when we had these conversations in '09 and 2010. What is this going to do, the way that we're handling traffic on 56 coming through town to truck traffic?
It's gonna, go ahead.
Well, as far as intermodal's concerned, I mean, that's what the new interchange is intended to handle. And I think you saw on Dave's slide that the traffic actually
Is supposed to decrease.
Yeah.
Yeah, either net
Stay
neutral
flat.
or, yeah.
So, even without shifting 56 to 199th Street, the truck traffic is intended to go south there.
Okay.
In a 56 realignment, a modification of the 56, 175th Warren, you know, that proposal is dependent upon a 56 realignment further west, right? The one in where we would put a roundabout taking 56 up to 175th, before that occurs, that was it. This is dependent upon a 56 realignment further west.
Right, right. And yes, and one of two things would happen. Number one, you improve the access at that intersection. The truck traffic, and the traffic's going to be using it, whether US 56 changes or not, because there's a lot of work that's going to need to happen there. At some point, and before it's realigned, the city will need to get KDOT on board to assist in these improvements.
Right.
Some other issues out there that would, future officials here are going to need to worry about is basically what to do with existing US 56 between Moonlight and Clare. It's a major facility with major bridges. There's a lot of work that we're going to have to be cognizant of. Negotiations need to take place before US 56 is
Abandoned.
redesignated.
Yeah,
Well-
redeployed.
Well, and I'm hoping maybe you can, because it seems like we're recommending to stick with the 56 corridor management plan, whereas if we were to reroute, if we were to support rerouting 56 along 199th Street, while we would lose some traffic through town, I mean, we'd lose an awful lot of truck traffic that doesn't generally stop downtown. And, you know, I mean, I think that previous councils have addressed trying to revitalize downtown, but I think we're a little held hostage by having a state road running through the middle of town. is there a reason that we want to stick with recommending the 56 corridor management plan over trying to recommend that they reroute it off 199th Street?
Well, I think first answer I would have is what's recommended as far as mainly the plan through town is access management.
Right.
And access management, whether it's US 56 or whether it's a city street, is crucial because the volumes are going to be there whether it's US 56 or not. And in order to get traffic through town, it's essential. So I think the plan, even though it may cease to be US 56 someday, and I don't know when that day will, to quote The Godfather, and that day may never come, but, you know, it's essential just to maintain traffic in our town.
Yeah. Well, and I understand that, and that, if they were to reroute US 56, I mean, and if they were to do that before we got development done on the east side of I-35, I mean, would we not be getting state assistance on signalization and things for the interchange at 175th Street?
Well, whether the interchange, of course, is going to remain an I-35 interchange, whether it's US 56 or not.
Okay.
So there'll be, you know, typically KDOT would look to the locals to take care of maintenance of the crossroad, but once you get to the ramps and anything impacting I-35, they're involved.
But right now, we don't have ongoing maintenance costs of that stretch of road, and at this point, we only have one bridge that we maintain.
Well, actually, we don't, actually, right now, we don't do it, we do not maintain anything on US 56.
No, but Center Street's our only,
Center Street.
is
but
our
that's-
only bridge, right?
It's the only bridge, well, we have like 9 bridges,
But it's our only
big bridge.
big bridge
Yes.
span. And we would then, if that, on a reroute, we would be taking on then the flyover at New Center. So we'd be bringing on fairly significant maintenance
Mhm.
cost into the general fund as a result of that, as a result of moving 56 over to 199 and realigning to 35 and not keeping that a state.
No, and I've understood that through the years. I'm wondering, and you have been involved in city government much
Right.
longer than I have. It does seem that we've tried through the years to establish a way to
Absolutely.
vitalize the downtown area.
And
but it-
control of 56 would be a very big step in the right direction.
Right.
Understanding the
The
when and how
ramifications
much
of,
and so on. I think,
Yeah.
To Dave's point, if we, if we limit the flow of traffic, pass-through traffic with the Homestead interchange, that's gonna help downtown in taking trucks off of that route, if that's truly the path they're gonna follow. If they're not going out here, to, the 175th or, just on the west end of our town. So, I think that from that standpoint, it would be good to encourage it, but we have to understand that we have to be prepared, I guess, is the way to put it, is how we're going to add those additional lane miles to our maintenance.
yeah, and I do understand that.
Right.
I just,
So I think we, from the standpoint of supporting, I think we all support an eventual realignment.
mhm.
Just don't know how rapid.
Well, and none of these things are gonna happen overnight. We're talking about,
But we need to be prepared for beyond overnight.
Yeah.
That's my
Absolutely.
concern after getting out of this meeting today. I mean, there's some mega dollars coming down the road, no pun intended, with respects to what Homestead Interchange is bringing on and how it is diverting, that heavy haul truck traffic out of downtown Gardner. but, there's some other associated costs moving west for those roads that are running east and west between Gardner and Edgerton, 14 inches of concrete roads, et cetera, what did we hear, $1.5 million per mile per lane road. I mean, there's a lot of dollars out there that Edgerton is having picked up by the railroad that we're not gonna realize, but we're gonna be on the hook for maintaining some of those areas that fall into our city limits.
I thought the Edgerton traffic was south of 199th to Homestead.
That's true, it's coming in off of 35 and going northbound, but there's gonna be some traffic going eastbound as well.
And I-35 cuts through here at kind of a weird angle, so it's, are you talking about, where are you talking about where we're going to have to bear costs?
We're looking at, again, the study talked about 175th and 199th, and really, thank you, more of that was coming in on 199th.
It is.
That heavy truck traffic could be realized based on this 5-county study and what we heard today.
I thought the heavy truck traffic was gonna be 191st from Waverly Road west to Four Corners Road. Isn't that right?
191st is the immediate concern.
Yeah.
He's saying 199th. Are you saying 191st or 199th?
199 and 191st. I heard 199th today in the meeting.
Well, I thought 191st was kind of a temporary solution as they were building to get trucks back, for trucks to utilize that to get back to the intermodal side. And it's not at least that I've heard, a permanent long-term solution. That 199th is the permanent long-term solution.
Right.
And because on the 191st, it's more of a staging short-term period, and then 199th is going to be the long-term east-west road for staging.
The 199th is a result of this 5-county study.
Right.
Which we don't maintain 199th.
Yeah.
Right, so that's not costing
Well,
us.
and, I guess that's what I was trying to get at,
Yeah, so
is
what
where
do you-
is that costing us?
Now, which cost are you talking about?
What I'm saying is 20 years down the road, as the city expands west, there's going to be associated cost with maintaining that road. So what we do today is going to dictate what we can do tomorrow or 20 years from tomorrow. That's where I'm coming from. If you look at the long-term projections of this 5-county study.
So what you're saying is 199th right now is unannexed land, it's county land, and if we
If we
decide
annex
that
it.
that's a place that we want to go, then that's a cost
Right.
that, again, will be
That
assisted.
we're going to have to bear.
Right, I think, it is important, as we look at these roadway improvements, to be thinking about, where we might be looking at annexations, because, as we annex those roadways, we may not be able to get another jurisdiction to maintain them as we annex property. So when you have concrete or heavy haul up to a certain point, and then we have it in the city beyond that point, it becomes a big expense for the city.
So can I ask, and I don't know, whether it's KDOT or whether it's the county, if there's roads, so let's use 199th for example, if they maintain that, they do the improvements, they maintain it, let's just say for 5 years, and it's 5 years down the road, Gardner decides to annex that. I mean, from a budgeting perspective, is there transfers of funds that happen, so they should go down in money and we would get the money that, for taking over that maintenance, or that doesn't happen?
No, they'd
I've not seen that happen anywhere.
My guess
When-
is the
when the
county would
state-
redeploy their planned funding
Somewhere
to
else.
another corridor, and we would have to,
So the same thing with I-35, or 56. If we decided to take over 56, it wouldn't be like KDOT would say, okay, we have all
No.
these people out there that help maintain it, we're gonna reallocate funds.
They don't I haven't seen that happen anywhere where they reallocate. I've been in jurisdictions where the states decided they're not gonna maintain the roadway any longer, and it becomes a city expense.
now, depending on the economic, situation of the area in question, we could apply for CARS funding, right?
That's correct.
But there's income, or how is CARS allocated? Is that an income-based allocation, or is it a need-based allocation, or is it a matching fund-based
Well,
allocation?
CARS it's a 50-50 match for the
Okay.
construction. The projects, with the current formula is, the county has a theoretical contribution, as it were, as to what a city should be getting, how much is quote-unquote theirs. However, the way it's set up is, you designate what's your first priority project. They endeavor to give everybody their first priority project. Now, they may not allocate the full amount that's requested because of their budget limitations. But generally, the way CARS works, if a city requests a project and they say it's their number one project, they're gonna get at least that project.
But is that just for new, like new construction, not necessarily maintenance and?
No, it's, major
Both?
maintenance is a
Okay.
legitimate
Yeah.
cost. In fact, the last two CARS projects we've gotten were, Madison and 183rd, which are maintenance projects, and I envision, at least short-term, that may be what we'll be going after, is maintenance. But yeah, as long as it's a major maintenance project on a CARS route, it's eligible. One thing, back to US 56, there's an intermediate step. Currently, KDOT maintains it, except for we're responsible for the drainage system. They're responsible for the pavement. We're responsible for like crosswalks and things. Many times too, when you do have a state road going through a city, it's designated a connecting link, and they pay the city a lane mile amount to maintain it. Since we're not involved in that, I don't know what the current rate is, but it's just a per mile. I know it probably doesn't match what it would take us to take over US 56, but there may come a day when we will find ourselves, as we grow, KDOT says, okay, now here's our new connecting link agreement, and by the way, we'll be paying you X amount of dollars per lane mile for your maintenance. So, but that probably will happen someday, but it hasn't happened yet.
So, the other thing is, so we don't want the weigh station at 183rd Street. I know this. But where are the alternatives to that? Can they upgrade the current facilities, or are they gonna need to go south?
South.
So,
I know,
That's what I figured, but
one of the issues they're running into, and you all may have heard it in various discussions, is the fact that the existing weigh station doesn't have adequate stacking for the trucks, and they're trying to find a place that can have adequate lead ramps so you can get the trucks to stack off the highway instead of on it. That was one thing that made them interested in the 183rd location. You know, and some of the issues we have is if it's in the middle too, there may be bypass traffic. I think it's the city's preference probably to keep it somewhere where it is today, to catch the northbound traffic instead of a bypass.
Right, and that's the issue really is, if they put that inspection, and it's not a weigh station per se, it's an inspection station. State, the highway patrol has visions of high-tech chemical and radiation sniffers and et cetera, for that facility. You know, and if they're truly interested in protecting what's coming out of the intermodal, if it has such things on it, then it needs to be as close to the intermodal as possible, because once you leave that yard, you've got multiple directions to go besides Homestead to I-35 north. I mean, you can head west on 56, or north on Edgerton Road.
And they talked about that in the
Yeah.
study.
So from that, you know, that piece of it doesn't really lend itself to that location or the northern location. So it really does need to be, if that's the intent, then that needs to be right at the exit of the facility itself.
Mhm.
But from if they could, where it is now is not an issue, but my understanding is the the location where it is now is conflicting with, the K7 Lone Elm interchange and eventual, development of the K7 corridor is what I was told, which is the northern location, why it's an issue.
So they're expecting radioactive and other types of shipments in here, is that what you're
No,
Mm-mm.
no, they wanted to put that there to be a deterrent and to stop it. I don't know where they came up with that idea, but that was what I was told, that there was much more to it. It was inspection and not merely a way station.
To guard against and an ounce of prevention.
Right. But there's
I'm
nothing
guessing.
that would indicate that, again, if that's something that's coming, if that's coming into the country in a container, one would want to stop it at the port of entry as opposed to, where it hits the country before it gets to the country, rather than, by the time it gets across half of the country. But that was the information that KDOT provided me from the Highway Patrol.
My understanding, though, is that the port of entry is going to be basically the intermodal. If a lot of this traffic comes in, from other...
Customs port of entry, but not physical.
Right.
The physical entry will be at the port, right now, Los Angeles, Long Beach, but...
So what's the difference?
Customs, is my understanding. It's like the port of entry we have now,
So they do the
in Kansas City.
So they do the customs now and the port of entry in Los Angeles, for instance,
Well, there's a port of entry in Kansas City currently.
Mm-hmm.
which is, where is that?
It's down.
635 and
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
right off the river, isn't it?
yeah, it's right on the Missouri River.
And that's a customs port of entry, so that's, I'm assuming, papers and fee collection and so on. The containers obviously are sealed prior to loading on the vessels, and then those seals are inspected when they're received at the port in Los Angeles, and they're re-inspected when they arrive at their destination, be it, Elwood today or Alliance in Dallas-Fort Worth. So all of that is a part of their process for inspection. But again, I personally don't, I think that the expense associated with such an inspection station is over the top based on its location. If we were going to allocate those funds, I think we would want to allocate those funds much closer to where the material actually enters the United States, physically enters the United States.
I know that this is something that you're needing direction on for a meeting on October 1st, but, and I realize this was part of a study that was completed in 2 parts, and this is the second part. When would we have an opportunity to restate some of our recommendations here down the road, in regards to some of these things? I think as part of our legislative agenda, or?
I think that's one place it needs to be.
But yeah, I just want to make sure that, this is all in a state of flux as best I can tell. I want to have ways that we can readdress depending on the things that happen around us.
One thing, I think one way to look at it is, currently KDOT has, a current highway bill goes to 2020, 2019. One of the reasons this study came to be was to find out where do we go beyond 2020. Additionally is, should there be funds for whatever reason, either good bids, good revenues, to do some preliminary engineering, this would provide some guidance as to what projects on a high level to do some preliminary engineering to set yourself up for that future year. To answer your question, I think the first thing we need to do is to provide a response to the study before the final report, just so it can be part of that record. Two, kind of get an idea of the major projects on I-35, so when they start going through their local consult process, we can continue to state it. And then as we roll in toward the end of this decade, when the new highway bill's coming up, should be ready to start stating those needs. So there'll be numerous opportunities. This is just the first. Short term is just pertaining to the 5-county study. Longer term is to provide staff some guidance, so when we go to the local consult, we can say, well, what about this? And then also when we're talking to KDOT, say we're interested in these issues. So there will be numerous opportunities.
I agree. I think adding it to the legislative agenda beginning with this year's agenda and keeping it as something at the forefront. I know Senator Apple called me last night, as a matter of fact, and asked about that. He asked about the outer loop. And we talked a little bit about the history of that, and so I think, he's very much interested in understanding what it is that we feel is important to Gardner and this area. Calvin Hayden certainly is, and I think making sure that we, if it's Julia Lynn or Merlin Ring, Senate on the north, or Bill Sutton or Ken King on Kevin King on the House, that they're very much aware from a Gardner perspective.
Yeah, and Calvin was at the meeting today. I mean, obviously I introduced myself as a representative of our fine city and kept my conversation pretty ambiguous, but to your point, we need to make sure that we've got these placeholders and this, concrete knowledge of where we want to go, because, again, no pun intended, but we'll get run over from that big picture perspective, because, Brownback and Calvin and all these guys are talking about this, north-south connector, and I know it's come and gone through other phases, well prior to my time as a citizen of this community, but to your point, Chris, we've definitely got to look at this, study it, and keep it, in the front of our minds versus in the back of our minds.
Okay, you ready? Do we need to get in
So-
about weight?
We do want to get to heavy haul. Before we get to that, I just want to wrap up and make sure that we're clear on what we're doing, because this study's been going on for about 2 years, and this is our opportunity to kind of really speak as a united council. Staff's going to draft a letter that we're going to be sending to KDOT, letting them know that the proposed recommendations that are outlined here is kind of our council consensus. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll go to an update on heavy haul.
As you probably all are aware, recently BNSF approached the city of Edgerton about the ability to put heavy haul vehicles on their roads, and obviously specifically related to the intermodal, but existing vehicles can go up to 80,000 pounds, and their request is to go to a higher level. And the issue there being that if they're limited, if these importers or exporters are limited to the 80,000 pounds, well, there's a certain amount of money they can make. But to really make their business model work better, they want to haul more, because the trains can obviously hold more than 80,000 pounds. So specifically in this case, the property at the northwest corner of 191st and Waverly, which I believe is like the bottom right corner of that pink area, They were looking at an export business for grain to go in there, and what they want to do is be able to bring in the trucks at 80,000 pounds into that facility, offload it, repackage it, and then drive it down the road from there to the BNSF entry point. So what they had requested of Edgerton was, well, I take a step back. Obviously, you've got heavier trucks, you need to spend more on your road, make thicker pavement, whatever the case may be, to handle those additional loads. So with the...
Can I stop you for a second? Because you were saying 191st and Waverly Road, is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
So it's that,
Bottom corner.
the southeast corner of the development.
The pink area.
The big
Right.
area.
Okay.
That's where they own the land, the 18 acres belong? I thought that project was going up north.
I don't know if the details of if the property's been sold. It's much larger area I think they're talking about, but whatever business would go in there